my name is Becky Hobden. I am CEO and founder of ECC Test Lab. We are a cannabis testing lab located in Virginia. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about our experience with Qualtrax. We brought that into our lab early on, and the benefits of using Qualtrax from a startup perspective, but also in the cannabis industry. We were the first testing lab in Virginia. We started in 2018, opened our doors to test hemp, and since then have grown into working with the pharmaceutical processors, which is what we call them in Virginia, the medical marijuana processors. We are an ISO 17025 accredited cannabis lab. We are concerned about the safety and quality of your cannabis products. From the plant to the finished products. Some of that is wrapped up in regulatory testing, and some of that is just wrapped up in best practices for manufacturing. We focus on things like accuracy of our methods and customer service, and building strong relationships, which we have done in the Virginia industry. We are part of a small women and minority owned. We're the small and women portion of that owned. I'm a board member of the Southeast Hemp Association, which is really focusing on bringing standardization and consistency throughout the cannabis industry, throughout the Southeast bioregion. And so that's a little bit about us. To give you a little bit further background on the cannabis industry in general, there is hemp on that one side and marijuana on the other, although they are many areas of overlap between the two industries. Hemp was made federally legal or federally taken off the Controlled Substance Act in 2018, using the 2018 Farm Bill, and that's really when it opened up for states to come up with plans for individuals, farmers, or people to grow indoor hemp. I think that in the backdrop, a lot of the hemp that was originally thought of as industrial, things for fiber and food and textiles, a lot of what was grown in 2018 and 2019 and even last year was really for CBD hemp. And so a lot of that, has the same sort of testing needs as marijuana. It is, federally recognized. You can cross state lines with it, so it's a little bit easier to access the people who are growing hemp or making CBD products. It is regulated from a federal standpoint. The USDA did put out a final plan January of 2020. It does include guidance on testing. The main thing they're concerned with is does it have more than 0.3% THC, because that's the cutoff for where hemp is considered now marijuana. The FDA has been tasked with giving guidance on things like CBD products and anything that's once it's grown and processed. They have not issued guidance yet. That's something that we are still waiting on and much anticipating, but I presume that similar to the food industries, that we'll have some sort of testing guidelines. Marijuana, on the other hand, is not federally legal. It is legalized within many states, but it's a patchwork. So each state has its own regulations. Some states are medical and recreational, which adds another layer of complexity. Depending on how long it's been legalized in your state will correlates, a lot with how well defined the testing regulations are. But every state has some level of testing requirements, and many states have specific licenses or programs or certifications for a cannabis testing lab. So Virginia, we do have to be licensed or get a registration with the Board of Pharmacy, and we also have to be ISO 17025 within 2 years of getting that license, or that certification from the Board of Pharmacy. You know, again, every state is different, and certainly as the industry grows, each state is growing and changing as well. Virginia, because we just legalized recreational, or have a path forward now for recreational processors, they have created a cannabis control authority, which is similar to many other states, and they will be developing some regulations, you know, for how the whole program operates, but you know, specifically for testing. So you know, there is so much similarity between hemp and marijuana. Testing is a place where they do overlap a lot, but there's also, just in terms of the legality of it, there's a pretty big divide as well. You know, some of the testing, or all of the testing, is really the same. So we use the same instruments, we use the same sample prep. Some of our calibration curves are maybe a little bit different because a hemp product would have high CBD versus high THC, but essentially it is the same. These are the types of testing that we offer. Our, you know, primary testing is cannabinoid potency. We do have an HPLC that we use for that. The other potency tests are terpenes. So terpenes is another very common molecule that's found in these products that has, you know, been touted to have medicinal benefits as well. And so that's actually, it's a requirement to label on your package labeling to include your terpenes profile in the state of Virginia. So that just kind of shows that there is, you know, the value of that test as well as the cannabinoid potency in terms of the efficacy of these products. We do a whole suite of contaminant testing, things like pesticides and mycotoxins, residual solvents, heavy metals, and microbial contamination. So, you know, that is a pretty typical full suite of testing. Water activity and moisture on specifically flower type products or botanical material. We also offer that. But again, you know, we started out in hemp in 2018 when we opened our doors. That was really who we were testing for. Our market was the farmers and the growers and the people just starting out in this industry. And since then, we've grown into testing for the pharmaceutical processors who have some more sophisticated growing techniques and mechanisms for creating the finished products. And so it's been an interesting journey to see how both of those industries are working in the state, and you know, how the testing piece of this has impacted each of those. So demonstrating quality in a cannabis testing lab is extremely important. It's important. Quality assurance is important in any industry, but I think that the cannabis industry being so new, there's a couple of things that kind of to consider on top of that, of why it's so important to demonstrate that you have a top-notch quality system in place. You know, cannabis labs, this is a new industry. You know, a lot of these labs are either coming out of established labs, agricultural labs or food testing labs, and this is a new market for them, or they're brand new labs like ECC. And we're, you know, we started from scratch, just building up our instruments and our equipment and our staff to be able to offer everything that we do at this point. So either way, either approach, it's really coming at it from a this is something new that this lab is working on. And anytime there's something new, having a good system around quality will help transition and, take out some of the bumps in the roads, as long as you're all following, what's set out as those expectations. The methods and the industry are not standardized yet either. We talked a little bit about the hemp and marijuana side. Hemp has more regulations around it, but really there's not, any federal guidance on what testing should look like, and any sort of really standardization around the process. There are groups that are stepping up, particularly in the past 2 years. AOAC, CASP, ASTM, they're all looking at how to put out methods for cannabis testing that are standardized. And as more research happens and as this industry grows, that will certainly come to fruition. But that's something else to be considering when you're thinking about the quality demonstration of a cannabis lab. The other things that are happening, there's a lot of conversation around inconsistency between testing labs. Again, this all goes back into being not standardized. Things like, how are you drying it? Are you drying it in a vacuum oven? I'm talking about when we get in plant material, it has to be bone dry to extract and run it through our HPLC for potency. So we dry it using a vacuum oven. Some people put it in the back of the hood and let it air dry. Some people use freeze drying. So, having those differences in how they test, one isn't better than the other, but it's just not the same. So it's not standardized. So, more research needs to go into specific to testing labs, best practices, and with that comes, collaborating between different labs, and that historically has not always happened because this is a new industry and there's competition, and people have been more guarded with methods and what they've learned about, again, best practices in a cannabis testing lab. But again, that's starting to change as well. I think we all see that if we can gain confidence in the industry, that, we're all doing this as, in an appropriate, standardized, best practices way, that will gain some confidence in testing labs. And finally, the industry is hugely dependent on the quality of your lab testing. So things like turnaround times and is, probably the thing from our pharmaceutical processors that we hear the most about is, what kind of turnaround times, because if they're holding on to a product, that means, and they're waiting for test results, of course that means that they cannot put it out on their shelves yet. The other thing that has happened, you hear about it in other states, is lab shopping. So, the value of a botanical material oftentimes lies with the cannabinoid potency. And so if you have a higher potency, then you can charge more. And so, I think this was happening a lot out west, and you hear stories about, if you don't like those lab results, you'll send them to another lab. And so it kind of tarnished the whole industry to a certain extent with cannabis testing labs who, were catering to those types of requests. I have not seen that as much in Virginia. We're a smaller market, we're just getting started, we're not recreational. But I think that the standardization that has been coming into the industry is helping to push some of that kind of activity out. Those all kind of contribute to why it's so valuable for a cannabis testing lab, especially a startup that doesn't have a long, 30, 40 years of reputation or even 10 years of reputation, but why it's so important to really demonstrate that we are following practices that, assure that we're giving you high quality results, accurate results, and that it's just something else to look at, to make sure that to give people a sense of ease and that their cannabis testing lab is doing what they should be doing. So, part of entering into that, why do we choose Qualtrax as a startup lab? One of the main reasons at the time we were looking at ISO 17025 accreditation. That's again another kind of go-to piece that people can look at, that customers or processors can look at and say, okay, you're ISO 17025, that gives me some confidence that you've gone through the methods to validate them, that you have a system in place to give us that assurance. So we partnered with Qualtrax. Again, we were in Blacksburg, so we were lucky enough to be able to go and sit in our training. We went to their office, so we had some really good one-on-one training, and so that coupled with the fact that being a startup, we were looking at potentially hiring a quality manager. But by putting Qualtrax in place, I think that allowed that to be more of a group effort, not one specific person. We were a small group of people. Right now there's 4 of us total, and so we're all contributing to our quality management system. And it really sped up getting ISO accredited, and so that has been a huge benefit as well. It also helps us stand out. So we've been audited by many of our customers. We've been audited by the Board of Pharmacy. People who are investors have also, come through, and Qualtrax is certainly something that we pointed to say, we did take on this extra piece because we see the value that it gives to us by just saying we have a system in place, it's automated, it's in the cloud, it has things that, support system that if we need to know how to do it, it's not just a bunch of Excel sheets, hidden in different folders, it's in one place, it's concise, and it's consistent. And so that's really been something that's been a differentiator, that we've really shown off when we're trying to put our best light forward. The other benefit for having Qualtrax is that it's easy to manage. This industry is changing, methods and regulations are changing, and so as we add methods or if we have to adjust something, it tracks it. The document control piece of that has been beneficial. Things like customer complaints and non-conforming events have been easy to capture in workflows, and then the trainings is the other big component that we're using just to again demonstrate that we are following these protocols. And so again, that's really been getting us to our ISO 17025 accreditation. And so this is a timeline of ECC. We opened our doors in 2019. We were located in Blacksburg at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. That year we tested for hemp, for THC and CBD, really just with that instrument, the HPLC. We did have also a GCFID. 2020 was a huge year of growth for us. That's when we started really developing our systems, including Qualtrax and our quality management system. We purchased several instruments to do all the contaminant testing that we needed to. And by September of 2020, we were ISO 17025 accredited. So that was just about 5 or 6 months after starting with Qualtrax that we were able to be accredited. And then we continued to grow. We actually ended up moving to Ashland, Virginia, so right north of Richmond, to be closer to the pharmaceutical processors. And then during that time, we also were getting these other instruments up and running, validating methods, and again, we had our final, or our first annual scope, annual audit, but we had with that a scope expansion that includes all of our testing. And so, you know, in 2 years, from June 2019 to June 2021, we went from, you know, basically just an HPLC to a, you know, fully operational, accredited lab where we're testing for a bulk of the cannabis in the state of Virginia. And so definitely Qualtrax helped us get there and propel us into understanding what a full quality management system entails, from documents to workflows to trainings to you know, all of it that they can help provide and give a structure for. And so it's been a huge help, a lot of support from Qualtrax, so I want to thank them. And if you have any questions, I can be reached at Becky@ECCTestLab.com, and thank you so much.